Good evening. Welcome to Right Talk with Mike Lee. My show this evening features really two beautiful guests. I feel I'm even flattered to be sitting here with them. And forgive me for having a different kind of water about you ladies. But I've envisioned this show as being one about actually family injustice part 2. To be followed by family injustice parts, whatever number necessary to get the issue appropriately before the public. And as you ladies probably should know, the purpose of the show is to try to educate, inform, and enlighten. And you young ladies are in a situation and a battle with a system within which I've worked for 40 years. I started working in law offices when I was, 22, 23 years old. That was 43 years ago. But anyway, and you work, and the issues are mainly in family law. And I believe you should well know, Ron, I believe that the main problem with our legal system, I hesitate to call it the justice system because it's seldom just. It's seldom just.
Yes.
And I'll tell you why I say that. The reason I say that is this. I've spoken with judges in mediations and in chambers and stuff like that. And many of them, not many of them, a few have told me, experienced judges, have told me that they feel that if the parties leave the courthouse equally unhappy, they've probably done justice.
And how is that in the best interest of the children?
I have always said that they don't listen. Now, if there's something that you want and there's something that you want, and I want both of you to be unhappy, all I have to do is not give you what you want and not give you what you want. That's not judging. That's not justice. That's managing. That's playing.
That's punishing.
That being said, it's really tragic and it's just low down and rotten in the family law area, because in family law, the primary focus is supposed to be what is the best interest of the children. Not the best interest of the judge, not the best interest of moving the case along.
The attorneys coming and
what's,
making money.
What's best for the child. And what I have seen too often during my 40 years of experience is, I'm going to take these off because the show's been started. That's who I am. But this is how I feel today. This is how I feel today.
Cowboy of justice.
I feel like Rough Ride.
You didn't tell us.
Riding rough.
I didn't know that we were going to wear hats tonight.
I would have worn my cowboy hat too.
I would have kept my hair. So, you know, it's all good. But anyway, and each of you could tell a tragic story. But I want to talk about the issue generally, first of all. Rhonda, you and I have talked, and you have said the problem is systemic. What do you mean by systemic?
Well, it's just not one particular system. There, as you know, with family law, you have the judges, you have the attorneys. They almost always bring in a psychologist. There's a guardian ad litem. Depending on where the case kind of ventured toward, there may be a CPS worker. I mean, you get a lot of people involved, and as you know, with especially in regard to a legal proceeding, having more people involved, more experts, more professionals, the waters get muddied, and everyone is biased to a certain degree. And so when I talk about systemic problems, it's all these different systems trying to communicate together, which really they're not communicating well.
And sometimes you have a few people communicating because they work together over years and years and years, and they self-refer and they refer between each other. And if that person doesn't listen to that attorney who gives them lots of business, then they're not going to be having a job anymore. They'll be out of a job and out of their lucrative profession that's very easy, stuff that's $50, $150, $300 an hour.
Excuse me, the part that really turns me off is the whole mess is greased with money.
It's
all
like
about
the
money.
Undercurrent. It's like the aquifers of Austin, right? It's like money is flowing to all of these persons.
It's a way to take a successful middle-class person and drain them and drain not only them, but drain all their tributaries, their friends, their family, their church members, their associates, their aunts, their uncles, whoever has money, they're gonna then drain that person. That person's got a brother or a sister or an uncle who helps, and they're a grandmother, they're gonna drain those people too. And it all goes to
What I have seen and what I had hoped when I saw collaborative law develop was many times the lawyers, my brothers, my frat brothers, they're the one who stir the pot. Well, if you put those two people in the room, they could probably leave out friends. But then the lawyers say, I'm trying to get the most money I can. You don't know what kind of agreement he has with his client. So it's in his best interest to try to get his client as much money as he can so that the lawyer can get as much money as he can. And of course, the other side may not personally want to do that, but they're being guided that way professionally.
Yeah, so your attorney will guide you down the long road that's long and arduous and a 10-year path, when really you could go to trial in 45 days, have a temporary orders hearing in 2 weeks, and be done with it, and work together and I think actually by going down this really, really long road, it further divides the two parties instead of bringing them
absolutely.
together.
The
you get further and further and further apart.
The
with more and
longer
more
the
people come
road, the
in.
more their chance for them to diverge.
Well, they're counting on it.
Yes.
So before
Until
we,
in the beginning you have people who are just kind of have a few differences, and you have a child, and then you have people that are so far away over here you can never be brought back together.
So before we start jumping into all this, I really, really want to encourage the viewers. If you are, chin deep, like many of us, in these litigations and eager to try and think of or hear things that may help you in your case, I encourage you to get out a pad of paper and a pen and to just jot down things that we say. We may, I don't know how tonight's going to go, but we may say some things that you'll find interesting. Also, you may email me, and at the end of the show, hopefully they'll put my email address up, but I'll go ahead and share it with you. It's atxchangeagent@gmail.com. I may not be able to answer your questions, but I will certainly pass whatever emails along to different people. I've been doing a lot of advocacy efforts for about 3 or 4 years now. I have an Austin, Texas meetup group called Speak Love. Speak stands for Shared Parenting, Encouraging Advocacy for Kids. So please, take notes in case we say anything that really can help your case along. We're not attorneys, but we are advocates. We have become familiar with the systems. And it's racketeering.
In other words, you've been grounded to the system
We've
so
been-
long.
And
it's been grinding on you so
Well,
much.
it's so bad.
takes-
It's not even just racketeering. It's like kidnapping your child legally for money. You want to see your child? You pay me this money.
And tonight's
And
a very
more money than people even make in a year.
And tonight's a
Huge
very
sums.
important show, I think, because of what's been happening with the immigration policies.
Yes.
And call it a blessing in disguise. This demographic of people, we call them alienated and targeted parents. They need more awareness, and this may be the catalyst to get the proper attention, because with all of the talk about it, they're associating what's happening to these families, the separation of parents and children, as child abuse. That's exactly what it is. It is
They do
child
that exact
abuse.
same thing in family courts, and people do not come out. They do not stand up. They do not make outcries. And people think you've done something wrong when you've done absolutely nothing wrong. You've done no more wrong, or you've done less than the people crossing the bar.
There's a stigma attached
There's a
to it.
stigma.
Yeah.
Oh, you must have done
Yeah.
something wrong, or you must be crazy, or you must have so you're like, no, someone just makes, hundreds of thousands of dollars more than I do, or someone has a really aggressive, good attorney, and
They can afford it.
I don't.
They can afford it.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if that's complacency in those people who haven't experienced it, where they just don't want to be involved. I don't know if it's ignorance. I don't know if it's misconceptions, where we think that there's actually justice happening in our courtrooms.
There's not. Yeah, it's.
Yeah, I don't know, but whatever it is, it's got to stop, because if this system can get this much out of control, there's no stopping, and we've already have a long, rich history of tragedy, I often talk about how I see a lot of parallelism to what's happening in our communities to the Holocaust. How people just turned their heads, turned the cheek to what was happening. As long as it wasn't happening to them, it didn't really...
And their children.
Right, it didn't
yeah.
bother them. But
But if
sooner
their neighbors
or
or
later,
their best friends' children or their sister's children, if it happens to them, well, that person screwed up or something. And it's not about screwing up or right and wrong in this system. It's a system of corruption and injustice, and it hurts the children. And it's almost like colonialism. I've read an article by AARP, and they talk about colonialism has been happening for a really long time, and it's done because it works. Separating children from their family at a very young age causes lifelong problems in terms of mental health, in terms of development, in terms of ability to have future relationships. Attachment. It creates a person who has lost the bonds of their family, so they're not going to be as functional members of society.
Yeah.
So, Celina and Rhonda, actually, the so-called judicial system is being used to perpetrate child abuse and family violence and all kinds of problems. Creating problems rather than solving them.
I call it family
Exactly.
violence by proxy.
Exactly.
They are actually creating or fostering family violence. They're doing the very same things that they claim to be intervening on.
They're
But-
allowing the power and control wheel to happen in a method that's done with money, with papers, with judges signing orders, and by denying someone access to their child.
They're violating constitutional rights. They are not following due process. They are creating such disparities between the two parents. They often, it seems like they either side with the one who's not really mentally fit because they know that it's going to drag the case out.
Because the longer the case goes on, the better it is from an economic standpoint.
The more money that the attorneys make, the more money they're able to donate to the judges, and the more
Right.
money all the other players who stand up there and say, "Oh, I'm worried about her behavior," and you're like, "What behavior? You know, what are you talking about?" And all it is someone has to say, "I'm worried about this person's behavior," without any material proof, material allegations that happened to me, and you know.
Now, Celina,
Nothing done, and the judge says she's
Celina,
very well on the cusp
I had
of
never
using
met
primary
you
custody.
before. I'd like to know a little bit about your personal story,
Yeah.
your personal story, to the extent that you're able to talk
Yeah,
about it.
well, that's something like that happened. You know, I kind of had an idyllic life, well educated, multiple homes, a car, a business, a supportive family, a member of Austin for a very long time, working in the community, and I had a child, and as soon as I filed for child support, it was like mind-blowing, the stuff that started happening. You start being gaslighted and things start getting made up, and you think, what's going on? And this is at a very vulnerable time when you're, breastfeeding. I actually had a broken leg and, was going to safe place counseling, and certain things like that a lot of times never gets brought up in the family court. Instead, you can have one expert. I don't know if you want me to read something that, if you really think about it, it would almost make you laugh.
As she's searching, can I jump in really quickly and just say, research indicates that typically when a woman will speak out, and I don't know if it goes the same way for men, because we do understand that men can be abused too, that they can experience domestic violence.
Yes.
But typically when women speak out early in a litigation or to get protection from an attorney, that so often the woman immediately loses custody of the child. Research shows that. I don't know why that is, but there is something that needs to be researched, and something needs to be done about it.
Yeah, and I actually have that sort of exact thing happened here. I want to read something from the guardian ad litem, which she testified to.
Is this in your case?
This is in my case. This is a court transcript from 2016, August in 2016. My baby had barely met his father when I filed for child support, and I had spent over a year during the entire pregnancy and the first half of his life, or the first part of his life, trying to get him involved. And eventually I was like, well, fine, you won't get involved. The government will make you get involved, And thinking that it would bring us together if he kind of had some sort of like rule that he had to follow, and he was obligated to do his visits and that sort of thing. The guardian ad litem, she comes in, I'm thinking, oh, she's gonna be, on my side, fair. Like, he's already tried to sue me for custody, take the baby out one time. I mean, you just someone make stuff up. They can go in the court, write an affidavit that is completely untrue, and then have your child taken from your house.
Is your case in Travis County?
Yes.
So you go down there and get to play, roll the dice with judge you get today?
I have had 8 to 10 judges probably in about 6 months.
Because what you do is you get the judges today.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter. Like in my case, my judge wrote himself into our orders to be our only existing judge, and he was incredibly biased. It doesn't matter, too, if it's a rotating docket, because these judges protect one another.
That is
And just so I don't lose this train of thought.
Yeah.
That's the bozo brotherhood. The bozo, I call them
Well,
bozos in black robes.
There is some consideration, and I just want the viewers to think about this. If someone wants to research this further, that would be wonderful. But so I often say that judges are merely glorified attorneys in robes. And so many of the
You're
judges...
more kind than I will ever be.
So many of the family law attorney or judges, I believe, come from the School of Family Law. So there's something to be said about that, right? Like if they're sharing the same paradigm, if they're perceiving parents the same way, if they're trained a certain perspective or vantage point. I've read some of the manuals. I've gone to the UT Law Library when I was actively litigating pro se, and reading some of the manuals, and in there they called us whiners. Oh, they're whining about our situations and our children. I mean, we're being abused. We're being psychologically, financially, and you can even say physiologically abused because
Extremely.
The stress creates
Of taking a baby out of your
changes.
house. So this is, I'm talking to this woman after my baby's been taken out of my house for 2 weeks, then I got him back. You have to do the exams and everything, and they're like, okay, you're fine. So I got him back, and the judge actually was fairly going to end the case. At the time, I didn't really understand the meaning behind agreed orders or non-agreed orders.
Right.
My attorney said, oh, you need to agree to this. And I'm like, okay, thinking, not hearing the term agreement, just that that's what you did and that's how you got along and you went forward and you were agreeable.
Well, at that point in time, in that situation, people rely on their lawyers. I've been doing it for 40 years, I know. If I said,
Oh yeah, until
if
you
I said
learn.
do this, 9 times out of 10 they're going to do that.
Yeah.
Until you learn the games that a lot of because these, unfortunately, and I would like to, I haven't seen you practice, Mike, so forgive me for saying this, but I have yet to meet a good attorney who really protects the parents and children. I have yet to hear of them.
I met with an
and
attorney
if someone
today.
has a really good attorney, then please email me because I would
too.
like.
Yes. I actually met with an attorney today who's not a family law attorney. He spent 3 hours very kindly, he's my mother's friend, going through my case, and he told me it's the most crazy, corrupt case he has ever seen, and that I have been completely screwed by my representation, and that the things I've agreed to have. He's like, well, you didn't have to do it. I'm like, well, they said I had to do it. Well, no, that's why they need you to sign the agreement. And you're thinking, even as a really intelligent person, wow, yeah, that makes sense, but I would have never thought it. Especially when you're in the stages of grief, taking a child from its parent is extremely traumatic, especially when it's a young parent and a mother's still nursing her baby. So what they're doing on the borders, they had just done to me. I just got my baby back, and I'm talking to the guardian ad litem about how I'm concerned about my baby, and he seems different, and he's not making eye contact. Normal stuff, like mom stuff, like, oh, he needs more milk when he goes to the dad's. Oh, I'd like to send him a diaper bag. Normal stuff. This is demonized and turned into something ridiculous. And she says, and I'm going to read so I don't tell my story and I say the real story. Ms. Vogel states, I said very directly to Ms. Harp and her parents that I am very concerned about her behaviors. She's reported things that are alarming, as early as last week, stating that the child was dropping in his weight percentile because of the overnights with the dad. He was suffering because of the overnights with the dad. I called the pediatrician. She said there is no drop in weight percentile. It's things like that that really scare me. And I will interject here, my baby, I have the pediatrician's records. He had gone from being 95th percentile to after 4 days with the dad to 75th percentile. And then he'd gone back up after being back with me for 2 months to 85th. So it's right there. I don't know if she just didn't get the right information or if she's just directly lying or if she talked to the dad and said, I just can't put logic behind that. But anyways, I will proceed. I spent a lot of time with this family. I spent time at Ms. Harp's home, the dad's home. I can't say the name on because I'm under a gag order, which is another thing they do, which will put me in jail if I accidentally slip up and say the wrong thing. She goes on there.
That's a violation of constitutional rights.
Well,
Yeah.
If you want to hear something crazy, I know of a case where there was a woman who ran from the house. She was running from her husband. She felt he was going to beat her. She was running from him, and the CPS worker in her report said they were engaging in a voluntary race. Seriously.
Oh,
I
there's
believe
so
it.
much
I believe it,
crazy
yeah.
making. There's
So
so
she
much.
goes on and she says, the drama level about how this child is suffering compared to the happy, healthy baby that I've seen in other people's worries me. There was also a lot of bias. She refused to come to see the drop-offs. When I asked him to drop offs, my baby would start screaming when she'd see the dad. She only saw him when he came back, when he was like, Mama, missed you, oh my gosh. He's happy then because he's coming back. she refused to talk to my parents. She refused to talk to my brothers until very end after many phone calls. She never talked to any of my friends.
But excuse me, Celina,
Yeah.
what's wrong is, in that system, in order for you to deal with that, you have to pay some lawyer.
Yes.
Yes,
Good
and I didn't
Well,
have a
not only
lawyer.
that.
You know, so she's talking to the other attorney, not to me, not to my family.
They don't come cheap, by the way.
Oh, I
Guardian
know.
ad
litem's
litems are
trust
incredibly
me, I know.
expensive.
I
Yes,
know.
I paid this
Especially if
woman
they're willing to travel.
$2,500, and she says stuff like, "The exchanges are horrible. People are videotaping. Mr. Cope
Accountability. I mean,
takes pictures of the baby's skin before he takes him back and when he gets him because he's scared of the allegations." If you think about this, really, like the judge is thinking, oh, she's horrible, look what the guardians say. But if you think about it, well, I didn't take pictures. I didn't make allegations. It's all a sort of gaslighting and manipulation. I call it obfuscation, where they take something and they wrap a big veil around what's really happening. And she goes on about, you know, I said I've been assaulted and beat so badly my face was covered in bruises and there's a police report. She reviewed the police report, but there's nothing like that in there. It's exactly not what I told her. I said it's not like I had bruises all over me. You know, it's a twisting. It's like not like there's bruises all over me. So she says I thought, well, maybe she's deaf. I made excuses for a long time. And do you mind if I just
No, go ahead.
read, like, so the judge, after this, hearing a few things like this is what the judge says. And if this was your infant baby who you had given up your PhD, that you spent all your time taking to, you know, Mother's Day out, you stayed home and nursed him, you co-slept with him, you took him to family events, you took him to baby play dates, that's all you did. And the judge is suddenly telling you, she's very well on the cusp of losing primary custody of this child because she cannot behave. And I just read what the guardian said about my bad behavior. And my attorney says, well, I appreciate the court said, let's just make it real clear. You know, let's just do our family if we're looking at it. Not even saying complete sentences. The court, she's going to do what she's going to do. There's already an order to use our family wizard. If she can't behave, it just hurts her case. And she needs to understand that the judges will give dads primary custody of a 14-month-old. Remember, at this point in time, this man is also yelling at me from the bench. At one point in time, he tells me a bitch
Judge?
to sit down. Yes, and when I try to speak up at the end, when I say I haven't done anything, he tells me, sit down, don't be a bitch.
actually, I've heard
It's not in the court transcript, but I have witnesses at the hearing. So
there are other accounts. Like I said, I'm an advocate, and I've heard so many stories of how judges yell at the parents and tell them to shut up and sit down.
yeah, and so he goes, the judge will give dads primary custody of a 14-month-old. This is a dad who barely met my baby a few months earlier and had a few overnight visits. He says, the court, they will. If she does not change her behavior, she will be without this child. It can happen. It's likely to happen if she doesn't change. Is it neurological? Is it some other psychological disorder that she can't maintain? Or is she just being difficult because she's always gotten away with it and there has not been any repercussions? I don't know. But if I had a credible motion for enforcement and it was proved, she'd be paying a lot of fees and she'd be getting a suspended jail sentence as any first-time person could.
Speaking of which,
And
Celina,
he goes on,
You spent some time
if
in
this
jail,
goes,
haven't you?
yes, and he did I eventually went to jail. If this goes your way and he
Wait a
gets
minute,
primary.
so the viewers
that you-
understand. The judge put her in jail she slipped up and texted early in the litigation, right? You
So
texted and
let
emailed.
me go in order. So
Okay.
you have this order. He's telling me, I'm going to take your baby away. He's getting primary. Don't think I won't. And I have done nothing wrong at this point in time.
Except she asked for child support. That's
Yes, I've done
she
nothing
stirred
wrong.
the pot.
So I've sent some text messages in the middle of the night, like nothing that's not normal mom behavior to say my baby needs milk or late night, angry woman text messages when your baby's sick. One visit, I said he's got 104. He just got out of the hospital. He doesn't need to go anywhere for 8 hours, and you're harassed and hounded, and you're turned into a criminal because you're doing the right thing for a
And
parent.
it creates crazy making.
It does create crazy
It
making.
evokes negative responses out of people.
And it makes you think, what am I supposed to do? My attorney will do nothing. I said, please appeal it. My attorney said, no. I couldn't even get hold of him. He said, you're not following your attorney's advice. What advice? I've done exactly what I'm supposed to do. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Say the baby's not losing weight when he is? or say he's not at a lower weight percent. It was almost like I just had to sit there and be a good little girl and say, oh yes, everything's wonderful. I don't mind being beat. I don't mind having taken my baby away.
People
no
get
problem.
punished
He's fine.
for
He's
speaking
fine.
out and standing up and trying to protect yourself and your child or
And
your
your child.
children.
And so after this, I had a breakdown. This was about 6 months of after I had just gotten this attorney before this hearing. This was, I would say, 6 months of gaslighting, psychological abuse, manipulation.
You become desperate.
You'd become desperate.
And you make mistakes
You do.
because you don't know who to trust. You're desperate. There's no help. And so I think where you
You
were
have
going,
no family. Yes.
so you texted him, right? You
Let me
texted
ask you
Dad.
guys this question. A few weeks ago, maybe a few weeks ago, but recently there was a lady in New York who jumped out of a window with her baby.
Yeah.
Can you explain or elaborate on how? Do you believe that's something? Was that out of the ordinary?
I think she was so traumatized, and I don't, I haven't really researched a great deal into that case, so I don't know if there was, or if there were extending circumstances in her dynamic with her husband. I don't
would
know.
say that anyone that harms their child physically, there's something off.
Well, no, he's trying to understand why she would jump out of the hotel window.
So the circumstances can develop to such degree and such intensity.
Complex trauma,
that
there
they
is.
could do that could happen.
So it
Obviously.
can. It can totally, complex trauma, when you're in that heightened chronic state of fear, it can make you not be able to
You don't know how it's
things.
going to manifest itself.
No, and you become desperate. I don't know, again, her particular case. Perhaps she was being abused. I don't know. But I would say her brain was hijacked. I think that these systems throw around mental illness way too much.
They accuse people of having mental illness when they don't, and then they do things that would cause to a person that would cause mental illness in almost anyone.
Celina,
So wait a minute. If we're going to talk about a case,
to
can
state
we?
in a more simplified fashion, you file for child support and end up going to jail.
Yes.
That's the bottom line.
Bottom line, I go to jail on the weekends right now. And I
And
also
how is-
I've seen my son for a brief 2-week period in 6 months. I saw him 6 times in a brief 2-week period in March.
That was supervised?
Supervised. And for the past 2 years, since after this hearing, I had a little breakdown and I packed up my sweet little angel muffin and put him in the car and drove off for a few weeks. Came back only to be arrested, and I tried to fly back, but the dad wouldn't help me. He needed to sign a paper saying I could get on the flight with the baby, Not a visa, not a passport, just a, hey, have permission to fly, as the dad, how you're supposed to do. So I came back. I will say I crossed state lines. I spent 2 years fighting criminal prosecution. Finally, it's been dismissed as of last week, and I wasn't allowed to talk about this while it was still ongoing criminal prosecution. I have been punished more than most child molesters, felons, child abusers, men that beat their wives. I have gone to jail more and been paid more money to keep my record clean than most people who actually do real horrible, horrific
crime,
things.
a real crime.
Yeah.
So how is this in her son's best interest? Also, how is ruining her life
It has it's destroyed my life. Yeah.
in his best interest?
And it's also taken my entire fortune. I've lost a house. I'm probably on the verge of losing my home now if I want to hire another lawyer to try to get access back again. And besides
ruins family
besides
relationships,
it's
friendships.
ruined, yes.
Her professional network. People don't understand.
I have
what's
had
happening.
websites put up about me online. It ruins someone if they're bent on ruining you, and they have got the financial means to do it. They can not only ruin you, but they can take your child
There was
away.
a drop of water that came.
And so after this, I made a mistake. I had a breakdown. What would you do if you were, it's just like the women in Honduras who are trying to seek asylum here with their child. I was facing family violence. I had a judge say, at the end of this report, they end up giving my nursing baby to a man who, when my baby sees this man, he completely flips out and starts screaming. I have it on video. I tried, no one would look at it in court. And I was protecting my infant, and I still, even though I knew when I came back I was going to lose him, I still made the right decision to follow the law, to do the right thing, thinking as a normal person, another person would forgive you or we could move forward. I had no idea that I would have him completely removed from my life, and now I've ended up with a final order it's a permanent situation where I almost cannot even see him unless I pay $4,000 a month under supervised. I mean, supervision is supposed to be something that's done for people who have hurt their children. I never at any point hurt my child. In fact, the opposite. I'm actually a very tender, loving, joyful mother, you know?
But you know, what grieves me is that a judge with even common sense could avoid all of this stuff.
There's no reason to say I'll lose primary custody of my child, because what if I was
they're all
lying
doing
about
this.
losing weight? So what? Like, it's just a mom's worried about, oh, my poor baby's so skinny all the time. Oh, he's so skinny, he needs to eat more. It's like the most mundane, normal thing that a mother can do.
So
And
again,
this sort of thing, it happens, and I'm bringing that up again just to bring across a point that it just happens over and over. All the mothers I've talked to, they've done some minor little
it's
like
happening,
normal mom thing.
It's happening to both mothers and fathers.
Yeah.
You know, it's happening. They're creating a lot of crazy making, and we need to really stay gender neutral.
They're creating problems, not solving problems.
Yes,
Right,
yes.
but again,
There was
what
no
I said-
problems in the beginning. Yeah.
What I said at the last episode that we discussed family law, the whole system is adversarial. The way it is, I mean, there is collaborative law, but it's not really being practiced. And those are the cases that really don't go into the courtroom. But the
Right.
ones that do go into the courtroom, you know,
They keep them there.
Yes, they're
For years.
creating, they're further polarizing the parents. And it's an adversarial, competitive approach where there's a winner and a loser. And that's
the child
where I
ends
say,
up being abused and
well,
neglected.
that's where I say it's family violence by proxy, because they're creating disparities and they're giving one parent power and control over the other parent and the children. And that is an aspect of domestic violence.
It is. In my order, I'm not allowed to text anyone in his family. I'm not allowed to, someone else has to hold my passport. They tried to make it him hold my passport. My father has to hold my passport. Anytime anyone accuses me of breaking one of like 12 rules, then I can both be put in jail or go back on supervised visits for the next 16 years.
And you have to pay a lawyer to
Yeah.
talk to
And
speak for
I
you.
have to I'm assumed guilty. The way it's written is I'm assumed guilty, and to prove my innocence, I have to go set a hearing. It's against all constitutional rights. And I'm constantly accused of wrongdoing. There's always something.
The winner is usually pretty much determined at the first hearing.
Yeah.
Right.
And he's got
And-
complete power and control over all my life, and I either have to submit, and even when I do submit, which seems wrong, I'm still accused of doing something that I did not do. Or I do something like send a text message.
And I repeat, all you did,
I'm put
all
in
you did
jail.
was request child support,
Yeah.
I requested
which you're
child support.
supposed to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's the way the
Before
state is
that,
set
dad
up. The
refused
OAG,
to have any contact with
they
us.
immediately get the paperwork rolling.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah.
there's a financial incentive
a
for OAG to
financially-
do that also. Could you
Yes.
elaborate on that?
Well, with Title 4D funding, for every dollar that goes through the OAG, they get a matching, well, not even matching, they get $10 per every dollar. I believe it's $10 through federal funding. So there is an incentive for money to go through the OAG. I personally wonder if they're offsetting their TANF needs, their Texans Assistance for Needy Families, because the state is so large and there's huge demands for support for needy families.
I mean, the problem is that child support was originally set up to help women who would otherwise end up in poverty and on TANF. And so it said men who are wealthy and decided they want a new wife, or they never wanted a wife, or they were just going to abandon their children, but they had the means to do it, needed to provide for the children. And now those men are taking the system, getting the children, handing the children to their mother, their father, their brother, the
again,
neighbor
I'm
to
gonna,
take care of.
And I agree, but I'm going to redirect the conversation for it to be a gender neutral because it's happening to both.
Right.
Well, I guess
Well,
the
you
only
on
point I
with
want
the guy at the last show, Rhonda, remember?
What now?
It was the gentleman here on the last show.
I redirected him, yes,
Yeah.
with having that conversation. It's not going to help us create this change, necessary change to these systems by having
someone that pays a much has a much lower
hang on,
income.
by having gender-specific dialogues. It's really important for us to work together to make this change, because it's creating civilized and systematic oppression and structural violence. What's happening to families in crises is violence.
Yeah.
And people turning their backs to what's happening, that is cultural violence. What's happening in the legal system with all these participating professionals who get involved and take lots of money and allow these cases to go on are creating structural violence.
Causing extended separation from a child from its parents, especially when the child is really young and can't understand intellectually what's happening. It's extremely stressful and traumatic. And for a baby to be taken from its mother for 2 months at a time, for 6 months at a time.
When the child is young.
Yeah.
If a child is 2, 3, 4 years old, it's easy for litigation to last until they're almost a teenager.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes they
So
do. It can last
they've
for
grown
18.
up in crap.
And
Yeah.
they use temporary orders. That is a tool used in the courtroom to keep things in a protracted, contentious state. I want to bring attention. I had before the show started, I had pulled out a big binder I have, and if I need to.
Is that that judge's guide?
Yes, a judge's guide. It was written in 2008
They should call it a book for bozos.
by the ABA, and it has all these participating universities and professionals writing into it, in which they talk about how it's a great book. I put it in a binder. You can see how thick it is.
It would be nice if the judges actually read it.
It is a judge's guide making a child-centered decision in custody cases. ABA Child Custody and Adoption Pro Bono Project. ABA Center on Children and Law. So if any of you took out a piece of paper and pen, please write that down. You can find it on the internet. It's free. Anyways, they understand how people misbehave during divorce proceedings.
Actually, Alexander Hamilton said that in the heat of passion, and I'll paraphrase his words, that the heat of passion, people make gross and unexplainable mistakes out of violence, and and his other words were violence or verbal accusations that might not be true. He says, but that doesn't mean that someone should be denied of their constitutional rights.
Exactly. Well,
and that's what they do, and the children are the ones that suffer.
So what's so interesting in this is a judge, Judge Robert Lowenbach of Colorado, defined, because you've heard us talk about how these protracted cases can go on and on and on, and how devastating it is to a child. It's detrimental to a child's psychological and physiological development. And so he stated, Webster's New World Dictionary defines limbo, because that's how they're describing this time period, defines limbo as a region bordering on hell, a place or condition of neglect or oblivion for unwanted things or persons. A child's sense of time is much different than that of an adult, as is the impact of experience on the developing child's brain. It goes to talk about 6 months in the life of a 1-year-old represents half of that child's total life, compared to only 1.2% in the total life for a 40-year-old. Now, it is absolutely devastating to the parent as well. It creates complex trauma, and it can render a once very successful and functional adult into an almost debilitating state.
Yeah.
It really can. We refer to it as hijacking the brain.
Yeah.
But for a child, a child's attachment, neurological development, chemical processes, they're all being affected.
And especially during the most imperative time. I mean, for my
Yeah.
child,
What
scares me the most is my child from 14 months to he just turned 3. I've missed 2 birthdays in a row. From 14 months to 3 years old, he has had almost no contact with me, except for and not regular contact, not once a week, never without interruption, for 3 times a week for a couple weeks, and then not for 2 months. It's terrifying for him.
Speaking of that, so it says the passage of time is magnified for children in both anxiety levels and direct effect. 3 years is not a terribly long period for an adult. For a 6-year-old, it is half a lifetime, and for a 3-year-old, it is the formative stage for trust and security. That is happening to our son right now.
Yeah, exactly.
And you know, there are...
I'm granted a 5-minute phone call by the judge, and the first thing my son says, "Mama, where are you? Where are you, Mama?" And I'm afraid to answer the question other than, "Oh, I'm at home in Marston's, my darling's room." Because if I say, "Oh, I'm not allowed to see you," or "I want to be with you," then
you're doing something wrong.
I'm doing something wrong, and I can't even answer my own child's question as to "Where are you, Mama? Where are you? I miss you."
Here's something else I want to raise everyone's attention to. So many people want to say if we just educate the judges. But I will say the judges already know, because there is the TCU Institute of Child Development. It's a very well-known university. And they have a program called the TBRI program. It's Trust-Based Relational Intervention. They are already working with judges, and I call it in the sister court. It's not family court, it's civil court. They're already working in those courtrooms in kind of abuse and neglect cases, understanding how important it is to reunite the parent and child, because it can create attachment disorders or reactive attachment disorders. So they are already in the courtrooms training judges on that. So you can't use that logic anymore that judges don't know. They do know.
They know. It's the attorneys that are pressing the cases and extending it. I mean, I had my attorney say for 2 months when they first took my baby, well, he couldn't even call me back until I finally fired him. I could have walked in as a pro se litigant and seen a judge in 3 days because we were under temporary orders, I had no idea. But I'm in such a state of trauma, all I can sit and do is sit in a bedroom that is at my parents' house. And cry. Actually, I couldn't even cry. I was like a zombie. I just would stare there like catatonic.
So,
And
I want to mention really
Ron,
quickly.
this is why I'm so hard on my brothers in the profession.
Thank you.
Because it doesn't take a law. It doesn't take a law degree.
I appreciate
to know that you can't separate a
degree.
14-month-old
You just
baby from
use your
its good mother.
darn sense.
Well, where's the
They
humanity?
do it for money. There's no humanity. It's all lost. They are completely lacking in morals. And what ICE is doing to the children at the borders, we have had being done to our children for years.
Yeah. Things have got to change.
They do have to change.
I was going to talk about how with the TCU Institute, with the TBRI program, when I did their one-day overview, it was on October 4th, 2016. I approached Dr. Cross, who is one of the leading presenters and researchers behind that. He's usually your point of contact with that program. And I approached him and asked him, I was kind of picking his brain, like, has this been going on in Travis County? Have you been training judges? You know, can we get you to come and talk to the family law judges and help them understand? And he told me just the previous day that he had that some of the individuals from the program met with Judge Lambeth. She's in Williamson County. You're probably familiar with Judge Lambeth. Well, I would like to say that, you know, I have a friend, a very dear friend that I've known for 4 years now, who's been entrapped by the family law system. And she has, just like you, and I was, when I almost interrupted you, and I apologize, but
you did interrupt me. You know way more than I do.
Celina,
I will go on and digress for hours. You know how much I talk.
Celina is like so many parents. I kid you not. I have people reach out to me all the time who say things like, I'm so glad to hear you speak out and say these things, because I thought it was just happening to me.
I did. I thought I was the only one until I met you.
And you weren't just the only one. I was just throwing it a general statement, but so many people. And Celina thinks she's got an incredibly crazy case. So many people have incredibly crazy cases. And remember, I told you about my friend who's in Williamson County. Her husband has created a fraudulent divorce decree signed
By the judge.
Judge Lambert's name on it, put the county seal, and used it to purchase a home. So by writing the judge's name and putting the county seal, that's first-degree felonies.
Yeah.
And then using a fraudulent decree to purchase a home, that's mortgage fraud. That's third-degree felony. And he's getting away with it.
Really?
Yes.
And here I took
So
my sole custody of a baby out of town, and they wanted to put me in jail for 2 years. The dad tried to get the prosecutor to put me in jail for 2 years for me going away with my baby who had barely met his dad. His dad was like a stranger.
Let me ask you this question. Are there very many or any support groups to try to help people?
That's
who are
why I
trapped- who
created,
trapped like
no,
this?
no, because we've reached out to
You
him,
have-
haven't we?
you have
Yes,
meetings and
and
stuff
we
like
try to
that?
have meetings. What happens is people in a state of complex trauma, you need to find people on the outside who are willing to come in, because this is a demographic where you have gone from being living on an upper middle class income usually and been relatively stable to a point where not only have you had your child stripped away from you, but you have had all your money stripped away from you, and generally you're paying child support. So you're paying a lot
You're
of child
paying.
support.
Well, I had to pay child
I
support.
am paying
for,
a good deal of child
yeah.
support.
Without even, I didn't even have a job at the time, and I got
Yes,
ordered to pay child
I was
to my
paying like 40% of my
ex-husband who's
income.
a doctor.
I'm paying
So-
child support about 30% of my income if you count the child medical and daycare. It's about 30% of my income to a man who makes $250,000 and has $1.5 million in property, which I'm sure
See,
is a
the
lot paid
way
off
they
in
play
Austin.
it in the courtroom,
it's
whoever
not who
gets
needs-
a child gets the child support.
And that's
Right,
why
right,
they do it.
That's why
right,
they
right.
create
It
family
should
violence.
be, it does, it should be an average of the two incomes, or it should be whoever needs it. If someone needs the financial support, sure, do child support. You're staying home with your baby and breastfeeding it and taking it on baby play dates and giving it baby massages every day, sure, you get child support while you're getting on your feet and getting a new job, because I just finished my master's degree. That's when you should get child support, or you just don't make enough to support all your children. So then you need child support. But someone that is rolling in money to receive child support from the other party, I think it's a primary reason why a lot of times someone goes for custody.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So
Well,
they don't have to pay the other
unfortunately,
party child support.
You know, and I often refer to this as a white-collared crime. What's happening in family law is a white-collared crime, because if people didn't have money to do this, if they didn't have money to feed a system, then it wouldn't be happening.
Oh, but I want to loop back to answer your question about the demographic and having support groups. Is when you get the women together, everyone not only doesn't have money to go to a real support group, a lot of people are not, it's like the white collar crime. They have experienced white collar crime, so you can go to a safe place, but a lot of those women have experienced like physical abuse. They haven't experienced the financial and the legal abuse through the system.
There's not a group or an organization that really acknowledges and has the capability to support this level.
And Safe Place acknowledges it when you go there. If you go to an individual counselor, because I was going to one, and they actually pointed out to me that this was abuse, and this was in the power control wheel and abuse dynamics. But when you get people together as yourselves, people end up just digressing on their own cases so much. And this happened to me, and this happened to me. And you can see the trauma in people where they can't even focus on how do we make change? How do we elicit this ideas from people in such a manner that we start acting on them and make a difference?
We're also rendered to a state of survival. Like for myself, I created a meetup group, and I've had plans and hopes to evolve it into either a 501c3 or an LLC. But right now, you know, I'm working 3 jobs just to pay my bills.
You're in
survive.
survival mode.
Or if you're surviving through the grief, you know, too, there's that where
you go through the grief phase, and as you know, I mean, it's not linear, you know. So, but the point being, this should not be happening in this day and age. It should not be happening.
It shouldn't be happening.
The system's taking advantage of families in crisis.
We should be worried more about our families than somebody trying to break in.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah, we should. Yes, I agree. I want to read something that the AARP on that subject read, and you sent me this article actually to read, which is so lovely of you to always send me the great articles. But it says here, this is the Academy's position to family separation, and they're talking about the detention of immigrant children, and that's the same thing that's happening here in the U.S. with with citizens' children. It says
Through the courts.
through the court system. These orders are saying, oh, well, what they're doing separating the children is legal. It's through a court order. It's through the order of Trump. It's through ICE. Well, what they're doing to separate our children and taking our children is legal. All the Jews were exterminated on court orders. They were all locked up in internment camps on court orders. This is a court order. It's like, what is morally right and morally wrong? And when we get the judges to a place where they say, oh, you have an order, so I can't change it right now, or you didn't file the right motion, or this is expired and you didn't give the right notice. When a child hasn't seen its mother or its father for months or years on end.
Well, one of the things I'm a stickler on is, I named the show Right Talk because we should talk right and hopefully think right, and in the end up doing what's right.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, I like that.
And we have some knuckleheads up there running
You
around
know,
the roads that
one of the
don't
things
don't
after
they're
she-
not even trying to do
Yeah, I
what's
wanna-
right.
After
I wanna
she
read
reads
this. It
that,
says-
hold this thought. Hang on 1 second, okay? After she reads this, somewhere down the road tonight, let's talk about accountability. That is a hot topic that we need to talk about. Okay, go for it.
Highly stressful experience, including family separation, which I'm completely against the family separation order, can cause irreparable harm to lifelong development. This is irreparable. This is not like, oh, children are resilient.
It can't be fixed.
Irreparable harm
It
to
can't be
lifelong development, the whole life, by disrupting a child's brain architecture. Toxic stress, which is caused by prolonged exposure to heightened stress, has detrimental short-term and long-term effects. When children are separated from their parents, it removes the buffer of a supportive adult or caretaker to help mitigate the stress and protect against substantial impact on their health that can contribute to chronic conditions like depression, PTSD, and heart disease.
I gotta steal this one from the president. I want to put American children first. Period.
All children, but yes.
Well, this is,
I want to put my American children first.
well, then let's clean up the courts. Let's clean up the legal system.
Well, I'll do
You
as
get-
many.
start rounding up,
I'll
start
do as many
lassoing.
shows as I have to do.
All right, start
You
lassoing
can
up
bring
your
as many of
colleagues,
your gang
though.
down here as you can find.
Okay, he keeps calling us a gang. The
Hey,
family law
I got
reform
myself
gang.
a little cup. It's like, it says, damn, oh, feels good to be a
Okay,
gangster.
I gotta
you
get,
know, like that song?
I gotta get ready to
Only 'cause
end my thing up here.
It's ironic,
Oh,
right?
are we
You know,
already
you-
getting close
I'm-
to
I'm
ending?
gonna- I'm
Oh,
gonna have
I
you-
want to
you-
talk
you
about
just getting warmed
accountability.
up,
Just getting started. Just getting started.
Yeah. Hey, I want to give a shout out though. Do we have like 2 minutes?
Sure. No, you got
Okay.
about 30 seconds.
Oh man. Okay, so anyone who's had some psychologists who you feel are, not doing the right thing, corrupt, however you want to put it. Some of them I know, Dr. Thorne is one of them, Dr. Alyssa Sherry. Please email me. I can get you in touch with some people who are taking action. Accountability, again, hot topic.
Yes.
Also,
Let her-
there
let
is
her
a
know,
parent
reach
who is
out.
suing.
That's the next show.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
If the mic's
Thanks
still
for coming
on.
on the show. Appreciate it.
Thank
Okay,
you, Mike.
thank you.
You know you're always welcome.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
We got a long fight ahead of us.
Yep.